Hello and welcome to today's episode of Inspiring Entrepreneurs. I'm Katie McNair, Marketing and Communications Manager at Strathclyde Inspire, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Alberto Lidji, Global Sustainability Expert, host of the Do One Better podcast, and visiting professor at the University of Strathclyde's Business School. From collaborating with UNICEF and the World Bank during his time as CEO of the Novak Djokovic Foundation, to interviewing more than 300 changemakers in the philanthropy and social entrepreneurship space, Alberto's career is steeped in his passion for innovation, sustainability, and impact. In this episode, we'll explore what drives meaningful change, the role that universities can play in shaping impact-driven leaders, and how Scotland can support the next generation of entrepreneurial thinkers.
It's great to be here.
Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. So thank you for having me on this podcast. Very much looking forward to it.
Yeah, should be a good conversation.
Absolutely.
So you're a visiting professor at the University of Strathclyde's Business School.
Yeah.
And you're here today to deliver a lecture to the MBA students about the power of an entrepreneurial mindset.
Yeah.
And so I just wondered if you could kick us off by talking to us about how you envisage an entrepreneurial mindset.
Well, I think entrepreneurship is one of those things that has a million different definitions. The focus of the lecture really is not just about the entrepreneurial mindset, but it's about how it's invaluable to drive forward social impact. And I think most of the things in my life that have happened positive were not scripted. You know, it wasn't, there was a roadmap, exactly this is how you're going to do it. It's more about getting the foundations right and having faith that if you do, positive things will unfold from that. And so that is part of it. It's just being able to embrace some ambiguity, feeling comfortable with not necessarily knowing what is around the corner, but, you know, being open to the likelihood that, yeah, maybe you'll have something unexpected, but if you have something unexpected, you'll have something positive coming out of it as well. And I think it's absolutely invaluable. The entrepreneurial spirit, because you want people who are going to take sensible risk. You want people who are going to connect the dots in ways that maybe others haven't thought about. You want people who are going to do something a little bit different. And there isn't a playbook for social impact. You know, so these 17 Sustainable Development Goals, they come in all shapes and sizes. So you got to be sort of nimble. Yeah. So that's my take on it at a top level.
Absolutely. Sounds like having quite a positive outlook on life as well, that kind of can-do attitude and feeling like whatever is around the corner, you're going to be able to address that and find a way forward.
Yeah. Now, sometimes you can panic. That's okay. That's not the end of the world. But the glass is half full, but I'm a realist as well. And positive outlook on life. Yeah, you absolutely need that. But that's good for even whether you're an entrepreneur or otherwise. Having a positive outlook, it's a good thing. It'll serve you well. So
absolutely,
make sure you get that.
Especially in these times, I think.
Yeah. Right.
So, as you know, I'm part of Strathclyde Inspire. And I was just explaining to you as you arrived that we exist to support entrepreneurship in all of its forms at the university. So that's among staff and students and alumni. And we define entrepreneurship in quite a broad sense. So we take it beyond its traditional associations with venture creation. And we have a startup team here that does support students, staff and alumni with venture creation and their ideas for businesses and services. We also offer a growing range of entrepreneurial mindset education and in the hope that it will help people move towards their personal and professional goals. And I think we're beginning to realize more than ever that having an entrepreneurial mindset is something that can really help create a generation of change makers, essentially. And so I wondered how you see entrepreneurial mindset as being a useful tool for supporting success and also for supporting social impact.
Yeah. So think about the creative things that can happen as you're driving social impact forward. Traditionally, you might think of philanthropic funding as a way of improving social ailments that might be prevailing. On the one hand, you might have that sort of pure for-purpose grant making. On the other hand, you might have a traditional corporate entity looking for risk-adjusted market rates of return. And then in the middle, you have all sorts of hybrid opportunities as well. Those hybrid opportunities are a consequence of somebody thinking with an entrepreneurial mindset of how can you do things a little bit differently? How can you merge the for-profit incentives with the social impact incentives? How can you bring capital that would otherwise be absent from the conversation if you align incentives and think creatively about, for instance, impact investing and having social returns in conjunction with financial returns? So that is just one example. And I just think no matter who you're talking to, I have 2 kids. I tell them to think about things the way they feel best. Everybody has their own style. So take public speaking. Most people are petrified of public speaking. I tend to like it, but most people are petrified about it. But I think part of it is you think that you're coming into it and you're going to be given a script or some clear notes, and you have to read everything and be exactly the way that somebody is expecting you to be. I think it's much better if you just think to yourself, look, I have my own public speaking style, you have yours, and there's no right or wrong. I'm sure you can deliver something great. The key thing is deliver what you feel is aligned with who you are, your personality, and sometimes that personality comes through because it just does, with your natural self. And so, yeah, there we go. I could go on a little bit longer, but
One of the elements we bring into, we have something called the Entrepreneurial Strathclyde, and that is our way of describing entrepreneurial mindset for us. And we try and talk about it in terms of skills rather than having, I guess, attributes that you might think that you're born with.
Okay.
So this understanding that you can definitely develop. This is not something that arrives in you when you are born, that you're entrepreneurial or not. You can develop the skills. And we talk about the skills being forward thinking, collaboration, communication, resilience, and value creation. And I think it sounded a little bit there like you were touching upon that value creation idea of that value comes in many forms and it can appeal to different people in many forms. And your personality will bring an element of what that value can offer to be. And so it's just a really useful skill to be able to understand the value in something that you're offering beyond perhaps monetary.
Sometimes you'll do something nice for somebody you've never met. I was taking the train from London earlier today, elderly person struggling with their bag. I said, do you need a help? Do you need a hand putting your bag up? I don't know. To me, it just feels good sometimes to do things that, just like hosting people over for dinner. Sometimes you're not expecting a reciprocal invitation over to their place. You just enjoy the hospitality that you're extending to somebody. Going back to your earlier bit, though, on the entrepreneurship mindset, whether you have skills, whether it's in your DNA, that reminds me also when I was doing my business degree, about leaders. Are leaders born, are leaders made? What I would say, in my case, a lot of it had to do with my parents, actually. My dad was an entrepreneur. And that entrepreneurial mindset somehow trickled down. There was that intergenerational transfer of entrepreneurial thinking where had my dad been working as an accountant at a big firm throughout his entire career, maybe my approach would have been a little bit different. But I think, thinking creatively about what you're doing and why you're doing it. I think as you go through life, you realize that actually it's a limited amount of time. And strategically speaking, the challenging things aren't so much what you want to do as opposed to what are you not going to do. Mm-hmm. So filtering out those things because otherwise you can be overwhelmed with opportunities and you want to do this and you want to do that. And before you know it, you haven't done any of these things particularly well. So I think just being a little bit more clinical, more strategic about how you allocate your time, your priorities, and also how you track what you do. I think I have an entrepreneurial mindset for different reasons. I am not the Excel person. I know how to use Excel. I'm very good these days with Excel, with record keeping, with tracking my time. I can tell you exactly, a lot of times, very granular details. But that's just because from experience I've learned that I need that in order to be able to drive forward whatever impact or change I want to achieve. But it's not because I love that. I love the big picture. I love what are the contours of what we're trying to achieve here and why, and what does success look like. The minutia sometimes I'm a little bit impatient about. That's perhaps a euphemism. But there's a lot of skills that I think you can use to equip yourself and have a better toolkit.
Yeah, fantastic. moving into, I guess, a bit of the personal perspective, and you talked about studying management and business. And so what inspired you to want to focus on impact-driven ventures and social entrepreneurship as opposed to more profit-driven ventures? You mentioned your father was an entrepreneur, but was there a specific moment or an experience that made you realize, well, this is the path that I want to take, leaving those things aside, talking about the opportunity cost of not being able to do everything?
Yeah. A few things. My parents were also very involved in the sort of social impact space and philanthropy. That was more on my mother's side, but I saw that a lot from an early age, and I never connected the two until later on in life, where I thought, well, that's interesting. Perhaps there was subliminally something happened there. What would I say to you here? There wasn't a particular time, okay, where I said, I'm not going to stay in the straightforward corporate route. I like money just like the next person. But I also know myself well enough to know that if I get a Ferrari tomorrow, I'll factor that Ferrari into my usual baseline within about 2 weeks. So before you know it, it's just a car. So the incentives to me have to be more than just some object that shows up in my front door, because ultimately that object in my front door, if it's a red Ferrari, it's more to compete with somebody else. And actually, I like competing against myself. I like to see how I can do something better next time, how I can be better than I was last time. And that's not achieved by a particular car or bank balance, but it's achieved through other means. That combined with being in the corporate space where I started off initially, and thinking to myself, there's got to be something more than just meeting Q3 targets for shareholders. Like, there's got to be something else here. Otherwise, nobody's getting any younger. It gets a little bit boring. And this was at a time where impact investing was coming to the fore. And so I used to be in the sort of capital introduction space, connecting folks, high net worth individuals with emerging markets and frontier markets opportunities. And we started getting into conversations where could we have a social return in conjunction with a financial return? And what could that look like? And so I never really thought, when I was doing my management studies at the LSE 25 years ago, where half the class went into investment banking and the other into management consulting, I never thought I was going to end up in this space. But I ended up doing some pretty cool stuff and enjoying the ride very much. And now, as a consequence, I get to have conversations like this one. I get to do interesting stuff. And life is, knock on wood, life is good and it's enjoyable. And I think part of it is because I'm pursuing the sort of stuff that I genuinely enjoy. And it's a false, there's not an exchange here. Like, you can be okay financially and do okay with social impact, just like in the social impact space. You can have ventures that are for profit and do well as well. So
fantastic.
Giving you a long answer, but
that's all good. You talked about enjoying almost being in competition with yourself, and I think you even used the phrase "do one better." So moving on to "Do One Better," which is your podcast. And through that, you've met and interviewed more than 300 people now: entrepreneurs, philanthropists, change makers. Through 5 years, or is it 6 years?
6 years. Early 2019, I launched it before lockdown, before COVID existed, and since then I haven't missed a single Monday morning with a new episode, which is when they go live. And I came down with COVID twice. My main concern when I tested positive was, am I going to be able to go live with the next episode? Fortunately, I was. But yeah, 300 and I don't know. As far as interviews have done, coming up to the 350 mark now. So
yeah. And would you say, are there any common philosophies or approaches that you've noticed among the people who you interview?
They're all very different. They're all very different, and some are more outgoing than others. But ultimately, it goes in phases. How about this? So when you had lockdown and you had COVID, everybody started talking about trust-based philanthropy, and now everybody's talking a little bit less about that, but more about the localization agenda and ensuring that whatever you're doing is co-created, and the voices from folks in the front lines is actually manifested in what's happening. And so a lot of the thinking seems to go in waves. And then there's definitely no silos in that sense. So everybody seems to be reading from the same script to some extent.
Right.
What they all have is also, and I love this, is that they have a public persona, which comes in, when you click the record button and they're telling you. And then before you click the record button or afterwards, they somehow become also quite candid, sometimes use more colorful language and really lay it the way they see it. And it's a privilege to be able to do these interviews with 300 odd individuals. That doesn't sound right. Not 300 odd individuals, but they're not odd at all, but 300 plus individuals who from whom I learn a lot every week. So those are sort of the things I would say, but they all drive change in their own ways. And that's the beauty of it as well. I think for the Do One Better podcast is not a highly prescriptive formula for how somebody should do one better. It's meant to showcase really great stuff, remarkable, innovative work that educates people, enthuses people, and drives them to take positive change wherever they might be on this planet in a way that aligns with their reality wherever they are. So I would be presumptuous of me to say, okay, you got to do it like this and you have to do it like that. I don't have the time, bandwidth, or intellect to be able to achieve that. I just trust, as I do with my own life journey, that if they listen to this stuff and hear it, they might a spark might come up there and they do interesting stuff. And I have heard great, the sense a bit immodest, but I know some people, chief executives, who used the podcast content to develop a strategy to present to their board. I was speaking to chief executive the other day who said, oh, well, had we known of your podcast, it would have saved us a lot of learning from a lot of our partners, because that's the stuff that we have, anyway.
Being able to access that kind of, it's almost like a time capsule of being able to, and quite a repository of being able to have all these different topics in one place. You could imagine, yes, some people would go to university to get that kind of information. And now to have this world where, people can begin a podcast about something they're passionate about.
Oh, yeah.
And they could bring together this community of people who are also passionate about that thing. You can get so many different insights and perspectives, and it begins to become this quite powerful tool in itself, I think.
Yeah. And actually, it's not just the Do One Better podcast, but it's a Do One Better podcast and Knowledge Hub. So really, I underscore the bit that it is an archive of over 300 interviews and case studies that you can learn from. So if you want to learn about social franchising, you can take a look at some of the episodes there. If you want to learn about SDG 4 for education, SDG 2 for nutrition, SDG 5 for gender, you're going to have material there, and not just from one specific type of individual. So you have people who are running foundations, people who are running corporates. So anything from, say, the president of the Oak Foundation or the Hewlett Foundation, both of whom are granting out about $500 million a year, to the chief executive or the head of PwC and EY and Intercontinental Hotels. They drive forward positive change in their own respective ways. And so it's a knowledge hub. And arguably, it's a knowledge hub before it's a podcast. Like, to me, the podcast happens to be the means through which you communicate the knowledge, you transfer the knowledge, you educate, you enthuse, you drive forward change. I have more of a face for podcasts, or more of a face for radio than TV. But it's just one mechanism. To me, it's about the knowledge base.
Absolutely.
That's the main thing.
Well, that was going to be my next question, actually. Equipping future generations with the skills that they need to pursue a better future. It's obviously an important task for educational institutions like Strathclyde. And you've worked as a visiting fellow at Cambridge Judge Business School, and you've been the CEO of the Novak Djokovic Foundation and the Director of Fundraising for the Duke of Edinburgh's International Award Foundation, which is another leading framework for non-formal education in that case. And so I wanted to ask, what kind of indicators of success do you think are valuable for educational institutions that are looking to shape the next generation of change makers who might not necessarily see themselves as entrepreneurs, but they are passionate about making a difference?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things is just making sure that social impact as a concept is part of the experience when somebody comes through these doors to do an MBA, or if they're doing executive education. It used to really not, it was exclusively shareholder value and there is something to be said for shareholder value. I mean, there is something important about that clarity of thought when profit is a clear metric of success for shareholders. You need to maintain that to some extent. You can't just boot that out. But I just think having a situation where MBA students, let's say, are well versed in how social impact is framed, the global sustainability agenda, the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals, each one of which has loads of targets. So even SDG 4 for education, SDG 4.2 is for early childhood education. And so you have entire worlds of professional activity within each one of those targets, within each one of those 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Through my career, yes, working with Novak Djokovic and the Novak Djokovic Foundation and being the chief executive and being a director of development and fundraising for the Duke of Edinburgh's Award on the international side. Very different stuff, in many ways very similar as well, but thoroughly enjoyable. And you never know where these things take you and who you meet.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's a key thing that I would say is that don't expect everything to be given to you as a clear roadmap, and have faith in the power of networks as well. And I don't use networks in a sort of crass manner but I use networks because you never know who is going to say something unexpected that just triggers a completely life-changing event for the better. And the best things in my life have always been sort of an unintended consequence of an exploratory coffee with somebody. It's never been that straightforward. Here's my CV, and never, ever.
Yes, that's true. I found that to be the case as well.
Yeah.
What do you see as the main barriers for the next generation of entrepreneurs who wish to achieve social impact? And do you have any thoughts on how to overcome these barriers?
There are significant challenges. Climate being front and center. I think it's difficult to open a newspaper without that. But not everything is moving in the wrong direction. And so if you look at under 5 mortality rates over the last 20 years, things are actually improving. I think we're going to be challenged with certain things that maybe we haven't been exposed to before. Artificial intelligence is both an opportunity, but it also can pose a threat. I would say to you, just the best thing you can do is understand how to prepare yourself so that you're capable of dealing with whatever adversity comes your way as best as you can. Don't expect to know what those things will be because it's very difficult to know. But one of the things, not to plug a different university, but at the London School of Economics, the motto is basically understanding the causes of things. And I think just take the time to understand for yourself, why is this the way it is? What's driving what? Start with that. You'll probably be well on your way to overcoming the hurdles that will come your way.
Last year, Strathclyde, along with the Open University, was the first university to commit to supporting women entrepreneurs through the Pathways Forward programme. So we have committed to ensure that we embrace diversity and inclusivity across all of our decision-making processes at each critical stage of the entrepreneurial journey here. And we're going to be educating all Strathclyde Inspire staff about EDI in the context of entrepreneurship. So our pledges aim to reduce the conscious and unconscious biases often faced by aspiring entrepreneurs from underrepresented groups. How important do you think diversity is when we're thinking about ways to work to achieve social impact together?
Yeah. I mean, I've lived in London for about 30 years, and it's the most diverse, most tolerant city that I've ever been to. And I think the diversity is a plus, and the tolerance is a plus as well. Not everybody's going to like everybody, and that's absolutely everybody's prerogative. But I think having a framework through which you can engage with each other, and the diversity ultimately does give you different experiences, different ways of thinking that come to the conversation that maybe would be absent. So just like a system, the human body, the more if it's never been exposed to anything that's unsavory, well, the defense systems, the resilience, all of that sort of weakens a bit. The more you have exposure to all sorts of things, some pleasant, some unpleasant, in all shapes and sizes, the more resilient everybody becomes, and the way you evolve. I would say that you want both a meritocracy and you want to ensure that everybody has the understanding that they can achieve well beyond what they think they can achieve. Okay. And in that point, what I would say is that when you're looking at, for instance, social mobility, which is the big part of when we think about diversity, part of it is thinking, what about social mobility? Part of what happens with certain demographics, certain groups of society, is that for whatever reason, maybe they haven't had any exposure of family members going to higher education. Maybe somebody thinks, well, I'm not going to be welcomed in that institution, so I'm not even going to apply. So I think the key thing for me isn't so much about ticking boxes, but it's about ensuring that you instill in people the belief, which I believe is grounded in reality, that they can achieve much, much more than they think they can. Yeah. And that everybody is welcome to make that application. Everybody should give it a go. That's my take to it. If there isn't any drive proactively to encourage every segment of society to go for it, then you're going to miss an opportunity, and no matter how many boxes you're taking, it's just not going to happen. That to me is the key thing. It's just making sure that everybody can shine through in their own way and is encouraged to be themselves and is encouraged to go for it. And it's just amazing how many people don't. And some people, they've come from a more privileged background and they believe they belong and they go for it. And others who are equally as capable or more so, just no, they're just not going to go for it. It becomes an objective that's just too far. So that's the key thing. It's just that belief that you can genuinely do it. But you want people to be able to be good, and you got to have good people in there.
I think that is our hope with the trying to engage and have. So we have a network, for example, of business leaders and entrepreneurs who have been there and done that, and they have a lot of experience. We might call upon them to sit on judging panels to help people decide which startup, which spin out should get this round of funding to help get them moving along, and having, for example, ensuring that we will have female representation on a judging panel means that even as the woman coming into that room, pitching to that panel, you see someone there who is like you, and you realize, like you say, that you belong here and there is no reason for you not to be here, no matter where you've come from. If you are trying to achieve something, you're just the same as anyone else in this.
There's an outfit called Unconventional Ventures. I think Nora Bevy is the founder of that. But exactly that, backing interesting entrepreneurial ventures from unconventional origins. Folks who you may not think are the stereotype of who's investing in VC and so forth. I think, that's what I would say on that. Sorry.
Absolutely. Yep. Check that out. We recently also had our first social enterprise spin out from the University of Strathclyde. It's called Climate Change Legal Initiative. So it's a social enterprise committed to growing legal knowledge and strengthening expertise in the law to drive just and transformational climate action. Mm-hmm. So this was quite a significant milestone for us. I wondered what role you think universities should play in supporting social entrepreneurship.
So understanding the legal frameworks is really important. I think driving forward change isn't just about writing a check or having an intervention for folks who are being impacted in the front lines, but a lot of it is about changing the systems, and the legislative agenda is one way of doing it. So advocacy as well, and so people have to be. There is no shortage of ways that you can tackle social impact, and the advocacy and the legal understanding of it is one of those, just one of them. There was another part to your question, but
Just talking about universities as a driver for
yeah,
helping to support social entrepreneurship.
yeah. Social entrepreneurship is one of those terms that people don't know what on earth it means. Right. And even within this business school, I imagine if we approached 5 different people and asked them about social entrepreneurship, they'd probably give you 6 or 7 different answers
Yes.
of what it might be. I just think, to me, the key thing is, look, you can do good and make money in the process as well, and that's not a bad thing. I think part of the problem is that sometimes you have this antagonistic sort of relationship between the not-for-profit space and the for-profit space, and it's a little bit of skepticism, mistrust, and I think just understanding that you can align these things. But when you're talking about a business school context and you're thinking about driving forward positive change and being able to combine it with a robust bottom line, explore how you can do that and maybe showcase examples of where that's happening, how it's happening. The more examples that are brought to the case studies that you have at the MBA level, the more interesting not only the journey, but also the opportunities that people start thinking about, because you learn from examples, you learn from case studies.
Yep.
So that's something that I would say about social entrepreneurship. And just, but social entrepreneurship, it's entrepreneurship, It's just saying, pay a bit of attention to other stuff as well if you're so inclined. I think the global sustainability agenda, you necessarily need a corporate space. So when we talk about climate, for instance, you touched on that. At 10 Downing Street or some other capital, they can say, look, we're going to go for net zero by this year. But unless you have the industry players giving you visibility into what that market looks like, what that vertical looks like, it's difficult to figure out how you're going to get there. So when I was interviewing Keith Barr, who used to be the chief executive of Intercontinental Hotels, we were talking about decarbonizing 1 million hotel rooms. I necessarily need somebody like that to give me their insight on how you go about decarbonizing 1 million hotel rooms. And the corporates, they have the budgets, they have the balance sheets, they have the consumer base to be able to drive forward change that a lot of times a policymaker on their own, a philanthropic outfit on their own, they're just not going to be able to do it. So mixing things up a bit and thinking with a business hat as you're trying to drive forward social change is good.
Yeah, absolutely. You talked a little bit about some of the challenges and barriers, maybe even touching on AI in terms of this is something coming over the horizon we're all going to have to respond to. Is there anything that you feel is particularly exciting about the future in terms of entrepreneurship or sustainability or social impact globally? Is there anything you look ahead with great passion for?
That's a big question.
Yeah.
Okay. Look, AI, everybody's talking about AI, so I don't know how much to dwell on it, but I can say generally is obviously it's transformative. I'm an optimist in terms of this. So I know everybody's thinking, oh, well, AI is going to take everybody's jobs. And I actually think we have a situation where a lot of us are going to be freed up to do genuinely the area where we have the value add and let all the other sort of basic stuff get done through AI. I'm quite excited about that really as a tool for good. If you think about the ability of AI to start mapping out for vaccines, to start screening out for genetic diseases, the ability, to tell you about weather patterns, tell you about opportunities that you hadn't seen before. Ultimately, as a society, I think we'll be much better off for it. And don't forget, I mean, we live in a state here in much of the world where the electorate gets to decide who is going to be running things. And so I have a feeling there's going to be a healthy balance of things, but I'm optimistic about AI, and I can't think of anything bigger that's looming in the horizon than that. And I'm very excited to see how it plays out. Yeah.
Approaching the future.
How do we know I'm not in AI though? That's watching this video now.
That's true. Approaching the future with optimism seems to be a good place to leave it. So
Okay.
thank you very much for all your answers and insights today.
That's been an absolute pleasure being here. Thank you for hosting me. Really great.
And that's it for this episode of Inspiring Entrepreneurs. Thank you for joining us, and don't forget to hit that subscribe or follow button on whichever platform you're listening to us. We'd be grateful if you'd leave us a review or a rating, as this helps other viewers to find us.